Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a horror film called Dangerous Animals. Spoilers ahead. Watch out. And take care. The movie opens on the Gold Coast of Australia, where two Canadian tourists, Greg and his pregnant friend Heather, arrive for a shark diving adventure at a place called Tucker's Experience. However, they are unable to find the owner, Tucker, and instead they meet an eccentric local vendor named Dave. He warns them that a man was recently attacked by a bull shark in the area, which scares the tourists. Just then, the attraction's owner, Tucker, arrives and enthusiastically greets the customers. He asks if Greg and Heather are a couple, but Heather explains that they're just friends, staying at the same hostel. During the conversation, Heather notices that something is unsettling about Tucker. He seems strangely excited by the fact that no one knows where they are, and to make matters worse, a nearby dog becomes agitated and barks furiously at him. Despite the uneasy feeling, the two friends board Tucker's boat and head out to sea. Along the way, Tucker tells them a story about how when he was just 7 years old, he was brutally attacked by a shark. For some reason, the shark let him go, and Tucker was left with a massive scar, which he shows to them. Shortly afterward, they stop at a diving spot and Tucker tosses a bucket full of bait into the water to lure sharks closer. The two friends then climb into an underwater cage where they find themselves surrounded by several enormous sharks. The sight terrifies Heather at first, but Greg gently calms her down by offering his arm. Reassured by his presence, she gradually relaxes and begins to enjoy the experience. Greg or no Greg, there's nothing relaxing about what I'm seeing here. After a few minutes, the two friends resurface, thrilled by the experience, and thank Tucker for the unforgettable dive. However, things take a horrifying turn when Tucker suddenly plunges a knife into Greg before throwing him overboard. Poor Greg is devoured by the sharks, while Heather can do nothing but scream in terror as she watches the brutal sight. The following morning, we are introduced to an American surfer named Zephyr, who is traveling through the area on her own. Later, she stops at a local supermarket where she notices a young man asking the cashier for jumper cables, only to be told that they're out of stock. Once outside, Zephyr finishes her drink and secretly pulls a hidden container of ice cream from inside the cup, which she had stolen from the store. She is then approached by the same man from earlier, whose name is Moses, and it turns out he caught her stealing. He asks to borrow her jumper cables, and when she refuses, he threatens to report her for shoplifting. Zephyr is annoyed by his persistence, but she reluctantly agrees and drives him to his car, which is parked quite a distance away. Once they reach his car, Zephyr helps him jumpstart the vehicle using her cables. As they wait, the two strike up a conversation, and Zephyr learns that Moses is also passionate about surfing. They soon discover they also have the same taste in music. What do you like?
I don't know, what do you like?
Rock.
Yeah, oh yeah, me too.
And the common interest sparks an instant connection between them. That night, the two get intimate in Zephyr's van, which is parked outside Moses' house. Afterward, Moses asks Zephyr why she loves surfing so much, and she explains that it makes her feel like a free spirit, someone who defies the system. Moses is clearly captivated by her, even though that's what every surfer has ever answered that question with, and gets up early to prepare breakfast for her. However, when he returns to the van, he discovers that Zephyr has already gone, leaving him disappointed. Elsewhere, Zephyr arrives at the parking lot of a beach to go surfing, but soon realizes that her fin key was accidentally thrown away by Moses earlier while they were together. She notices no one else around except a lone truck and decides to check it, hoping to find something she can use. Just then, the truck's owner returns, revealing himself to be none other than Tucker. After learning she needs a fin key, he hands her one and drives away from the area. Later, Zephyr receives a message from Moses, who is upset that she left without saying goodbye, so she tells him that she's at the beach to surf. Unfortunately, while she's distracted by her phone, Tucker suddenly attacks from behind and puts a bag over her head until she loses consciousness. He then stuffs her into a large suitcase in the back of his truck and drives away. Who else is having an impossible time believing that this guy's never been caught? The next morning, Moses arrives at the beach parking lot and spots Zephyr's van, but she's nowhere to be seen. He calls her, only to hear her phone ringing inside the vehicle, leaving him deeply worried. Meanwhile, Zephyr regains consciousness to find herself handcuffed to a bed aboard Tucker's boat. Lying nearby is Heather, who is somehow still alive after being held captive for days. A panicked Zephyr screams for help, but Heather says it's hopeless since the boat is stranded in the middle of the sea. Elsewhere, Moses is heading to work and notices Zephyr's van being towed away, making him even more concerned. He heads to the police station to report her disappearance, but the officer is skeptical after learning that Moses has only known Zephyr for about 11 hours. He reluctantly agrees to file a report, but when asked for Zephyr's last name, Moses is embarrassed to admit that he doesn't know it. Back on the boat, the two girls open up to each other and Heather admits she regrets not listening to her mother before setting off on the trip. Zephyr reveals that she's an orphan who had a troubled childhood and even spent time in juvie. During their conversation, Zephyr notices a wire in Heather's bikini and asks her to pass it over. Without wasting any time, Heather passes over the bikini, allowing Zephyr to pull the wire free. Just as she's about to use it to pick the lock on her handcuffs, Tucker walks in with food and water. Zephyr quickly hides the wire and proceeds to drink the water, while Tucker rambles about his fascination with marine life.
Turtles are cool, and so are squids.
After Tucker leaves, Zephyr tries to pick the lock on her handcuffs, but both girls soon become dizzy and lose consciousness, revealing that Tucker had drugged their water. When Zephyr regains consciousness, she finds herself tied to a chair on the deck and notices a camera nearby. Tucker reveals that he plans to film his next act, while an unconscious Heather is strapped to a crane, ready to become part of the show. He casually snips off a lock of Heather's hair, causing her to wake up screaming. Ignoring her desperate cries, Tucker lowers Heather into the water, leaving her suspended halfway beneath the surface. Both women beg him to stop, but the psychopath pays no attention. Within moments, several sharks appear and viciously tear Heather apart, while Zephyr begins screaming in horror. Tucker records the entire ordeal before turning to Zephyr and telling her that she will be his next victim. Later, Zephyr is back in her cell, where she carves both her own name and Heather's into the wall. She then notices countless other names hidden beneath the peeling paint, confirming that Tucker has claimed many victims before them. The next day, Tucker returns with more water, but this time Zephyr deliberately spills it and furiously tells him to stay away from her. Tucker barely reacts, and he calmly suggests that she use the bucket he left behind as a toilet. As Tucker leaves, Zephyr comes up with an idea, and she realizes the metal handle from the toilet bucket can be turned into a weapon. Sometime later, the psychopath returns while she is pretending to be asleep and approaches with a syringe to sedate her. This time, Zephyr fights back and stabs him in the neck with a sharpened piece of metal. As Tucker collapses in pain, she grabs his keys and unlocks her handcuffs, but despite being wounded, Tucker chases after her and manages to inject a tranquilizer into her leg. After kicking Tucker away, Zephyr rushes to the radio and desperately tries to call for help, but no one responds. She then spots a party boat in the distance, so she throws Tucker's camera into the sea and jumps in herself. However, the tranquilizer quickly takes effect, leaving her too weak to swim far. She loses consciousness, while Tucker eventually catches up to her and drags her back onto the boat. Then he swims to the party boat.
Hey, come on, y'all, let Tucker do the limbo now.
The next morning, Moses continues searching for Zephyr alongside the police and lifeguards, but they find no trace of her. Later, while reviewing security camera footage from the parking lot, Moses notices a truck driving away from the same area where Zephyr vanished. He then spots a logo reading Tucker Experience and immediately calls the number listed on its website, but no one answers. With no other leads, Moses decides to visit Tucker's boat while Tucker is in town buying a new camera. Upon arriving at the boat, Moses hears muffled noises coming from inside, immediately raising his suspicions. He breaks a window to force his way inside and eventually finds Zephyr tied up, leaving him shocked. After removing the duct tape from her mouth, she urgently tells him to call the police, so Moses agrees and rushes upstairs to make the call. But before Moses can contact the police, Tucker returns and brutally attacks him. The two engage in a vicious fight, during which Moses nearly kills the older man. At the last second, Dave suddenly appears behind Moses and knocks him unconscious, believing he's dealing with an intruder. But Dave is soon horrified when he hears Zephyr crying and demands to know what's going on. So Tucker buries an axe in Dave's head without hesitation.
Y'all asking too many questions.
And kills him instantly. Later, Moses and Zephyr are locked inside the cell together, during which he apologizes for not being able to save her, but Zephyr praises him for having the courage to come after her. He then asks why she left without saying goodbye that morning. Zephyr responds that she's better off on her own, but Moses disagrees, insisting that no one is truly better off alone.
Everybody's better with Moses, baby.
Just then, they're interrupted by Tucker, who enters the cell carrying a harness. Later, Tucker straps a weakened Moses to the crane, and his condition worsens from severe blood loss. Zephyr is tied to a chair nearby while the psychopath sets up his camera once again. As Tucker lowers Moses into the water, Zephyr desperately begs him to use her instead, arguing that Moses is a local and his disappearance will certainly trigger a police investigation. Tucker ignores her pleas, so Zephyr tells Moses to remain completely still, and he does. To everyone's surprise, the sharks then swim past without attacking him.
I knew them. We're cool.
Enraged, Tucker pulls Moses back onto the boat and repeatedly stabs him, hoping the blood will attract the sharks. He prepares to lower him into the water again, but his plan is interrupted when a helicopter appears overhead. So Tucker is now forced to abandon the spectacle and quickly hides his captives before the aircraft can spot them. Back in the cell, Moses is bleeding heavily and may not survive much longer. So in desperation, Zephyr tries tries to free her hand, but without success. She then resorts to a far more drastic measure, deliberately dislocating her thumb by biting down on it with all her strength, allowing her to slip her hand free from the handcuffs. Later, when Tucker returns to the room, he doesn't find Zephyr as she is hiding behind the door. She then locks him inside the room and runs away, forcing Tucker to manually break open the emergency hatch. Zephyr, on the other hand, tries to start the boat, but the psychopath who has escaped cuts the power. She then notices a huge party on the shore and decides to fire a flare to signal for help, but is interrupted by Tucker. Zephyr then hides in the kitchen and spots an escape route through the roof. Tucker comes at her again, so Zephyr strikes him hard with a pan and pierces his palm with a knife before lunging away. She then bravely jumps into the sea and swims toward the shore, but unfortunately, Tucker chases after her in a speedboat, catches up, and puts her in a chokehold until she loses consciousness. Sometime later, Zephyr wakes up hanging from the harness, while Moses is tied to a chair this time. Tucker then lowers half of Zephyr's body into the water, expecting the sharks to attack her. However, they surprisingly ignore her too, and Tucker notices a massive white shark approaching, terrifying the smaller sharks and driving them away. Tucker throws a harpoon at the great white shark, but the enormous predator grabs the hook and swims away. Seizing the opportunity, Zephyr grabs the rope attached to the hook and begins pulling herself back up. Tucker suddenly frightens her, causing her to lose her grip and fall into the water. While swimming, Zephyr comes face to face with the massive white shark and is terrified. She braces for an attack, but to her shock, the shark swims past her without harming her. Following this, Zephyr quickly climbs back aboard the boat, grabs a harpoon gun, which she uses to shoot Tucker in the stomach.
That's not how I planned it now.
The psychopath immediately falls into the water, and panicking, he swims to get on his boat, but is pulled away by the huge white shark. Zephyr watches as the shark launches itself out of the water, with Tucker clamped in its jaws, before violently devouring him. The shark then swims away from there, but the harpoon rope wraps around Zephyr's ankle and drags her into the water. Moses, who watches the terrifying scene unfold, screams so loudly that he eventually loses consciousness. It seems like all hope is lost for Zephyr, but at the last moment, she breaks free and manages to climb back onto the boat. After the nightmare is finally over, Zephyr fires a flare, which is spotted by a nearby party boat that immediately rushes to her rescue. She then tries to wake Moses, but he doesn't respond, leading her to fear the worst. Devastated, Zephyr confesses that she used to believe there was nothing for her on land, but now there is something, which is him. When I saw you screaming like that, I just knew. At this moment, Moses suddenly says, "I knew it!" After which, the two share a heartfelt smile as the movie comes to an end.